Hey everybody. It is kind of a stressful morning. All of a sudden Restream decided it's not working for me. So if you don't know who I am, this is me. Glad to have you with me this morning. I don't know if the chat's even gonna work. I'm gonna call up the chat thing. Oh man, look at you guys. Already got some people saying howdy. Let's see if this is even gonna work. Yeah, there we go. Good morning, Kim and Keith and Stacia. Very frustrating. I don't know what's going on with Restream, but this is the world I've been in for a while. Only 2 minutes late getting started. So we are only on YouTube and Facebook. Locals, Rumble, and X are all out right now. I couldn't log in quickly enough. Morning, Wally. So anyway, if you know of anybody who's usually with us on another outlet, go ahead and let them know. Good morning, Ryan. Good to see you, brother. Yeah, everybody go ahead and hit like. I do see people hitting like. This is kind of nice having my reactions uh, bar right here. Let's see. We got Brad with us. Hey, brother, and Scott. Man, I appreciate everybody signing on. And Turtle Island Tetragrammaton. That's an awesome. That's an awesome name. You're most welcome. All right, and hey, we got Brother Tyson in the house today. That's great. That's great. That's great. And Cheery. I'm glad you found it. I think you're usually on Locals. Man, I feel bad. Locals is the crew that usually this is the crew that pays to support my ministry, and I'm not even broadcasting there right now. That's frustrating. They don't have integration with Ecamm Live, which is the outfit I use to send all this out. So Wally says AWS reported issues this morning with internet. I don't know what the deal is. Hey Eileen, good to see you, sister. Quattro. Cami says, good morning, too. Let me read that post you just sent. Uh, Quattro's in urgent care right now with his wife, Cami. Oh, wait. I'm forgetting if Cami's his wife or his daughter. Nope. Okay. Cami is one of his children. Yikes. Okay, they have severe coughing and stuff. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and pray for Quattro. Father, our brother Quattro is hurting this morning in urgent care. We ask your blessing on him. Lord, restore his body, help his family hold together in the midst of sickness. We thank you for our families that can hold together in the midst of great suffering. It's such a blessing to have families, Father. So, Lord, bless Quattro's family as they come together around him and oh, Cami, his daughter. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Let me see if I can't make this bigger. Yeah, that's nice. The native integration's nice. Yeah, Jen, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. It's not going to work this morning. Well, Restream is down. That's what's happened. So, let the other locals crew know if you see him waiting on the live stream. I can't even. Well, I guess I could get over to the live stream and just let people know. Plainspoken.locals.com. Yeah, I got there. I'm gonna let everybody know. Hey guys, the live stream isn't working here. Go to YouTube or Facebook. So sorry. All right. All right. Oh, we got D with us. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. Um Ooh, it lets me ban people on here. I can't do that. I won't do that. All right. Let's all right, I'm going to close that out. Close that out. Something I was sent just before we got started today. All right, that's working. ACNA put out a thing on the 17th from Archbishop Steve Wood. He sits at the head of the ACNA and has issued a statement in response to GAFCON separating from the Archbishop of Canterbury. I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to hold on to this for tomorrow, but just wanted to let you know I have it. I wanted to start today with a reminder that there is a Christian genocide going on in Nigeria. We've talked about it a lot. I'm going to continue to talk about it. This topic is going to be relevant and pertinent and important every day it's going on. We need to continue to draw attention to it. Here's a video. The mainstream media will never show you this. Caskets of Christians are loaded into mass graves in Nigeria. Muslim Islamists have killed over 100,000 Christians since 2009. They've burned 18,000 churches, 7,000 Christians killed just in 2025, an average of 32 Christians killed every day, over 100 churches destroyed monthly, more than 15 million Christians displaced since 2009, at least 600 clergy kidnapped. The killers are jihadist factions like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and Fulani militants who target villages, churches, and pastors across the country. The Nigerian government calls it banditry. Rights groups call it genocide. Muslims are attempting to wipe out the Christian population of an entire country. So you see them. Let's start it over. I'm just really glad to be living in an age with smartphones where this stuff can be documented better. And I know there's always going to be people who just refuse to believe, but it's important that we continue to highlight these things that are true and important for the world to see. I don't want to go to that just yet. I'm going to look at the news real quick. I didn't even get to look at the New York Times this morning or the Free Press. I'm going to open those real quick. Just make sure that I'm not speaking past anything that happened that I really need to talk about. I know that we had a No Kings protest over the weekend, and I appreciate people who are going to the crowds and saying, okay, what are you really concerned about here? How is this, do you imagine that our president really thinks that he is a king? How so? I think those questions are helpful. And I also think it's helpful for Christians to say, we do have a king, and his name is Jesus. And even though we have a country where we've rejected monarchy, we should never identify as persons with no king. In fact, right relationship with the Lord requires that we acknowledge him as many things, one of which being monarch. And so I think about this at least once a week where I'm thinking in worship, I need to call Jesus King Jesus or Messiah Jesus. Both of these titles are really important. And I think people forget that Jesus is our king, that he reigns as king over heaven and earth. Yeah, okay. So I see stuff here. I'll just scroll through the news with you guys. I'm seeing stuff about Gaza. They've been massacring their own people, and then Israel finally stepped in. And uh, it's weird how many people are just choosing not to talk about Hamas doing what they're doing. Ooh, they're having an article on processed food. That's a good thing to talk about. It was a wartime innovation, apparently. TV dinners. Oh man, that's a significant article. Might be good to go check that out today. Oh, I saw that we're escalating with Colombia. That's probably a good thing. I know that, like, in general, we don't like war, but whenever the Lord has endowed the state with the sword to execute justice, then Colombia is a problem. We've been picking on Venezuela, but Colombia is really the heart of the drug problem. And these cartels, if you don't know how they operate, they're just awful. So this could be good. Okay, continued developments in Chicago. we got concern with immigration. I'll go ahead and show you this thing I had pulled up here. FHA loans backed by the US government were going to non-citizens on temporary visas while young Americans couldn't afford to buy a starter home. We already talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago whenever Stossel did his report on like comparing young people's economic outlook today with back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. And one of the things that was clear is things are not as dire as concerning as a lot of people want to make them. But even so, I mean, as one who's looked for a new home in the last couple of years, prices there's clearly been a bubble, and there's this larger conversation of are tax dollars going towards illegal immigrants or immigration at all? Here, I'm gonna text my brother here. I should still be live. Yeah, I'm live. Okay. And I'm gonna make it so I can't get notifications now. All right. So there's clearly been tax money going. This is from Optimal Blue LLC. John Burns Research and Consulting. So you see, going back to 2018, that's as far back as this goes. These are FHA loans. There was already going to immigrants without permanent residency, including H-1B visa holders. So we've been incentivizing people from out of the country to move in, and look at how much this is just the total percentage of the loans going to. So this is just a total number. This doesn't correspond with dollar amounts. But when you look at May of 2025, it went up above 6% of all the loans issued went to immigrants. And these are loans that are largely not paid back. Actually, I'd be very interested in that. Let's see, can I ask Grok a question? What percentage of these loans are paid back by the immigrants? Sometimes Grok is really helpful, sometimes not. It's thinking. There is no specific publicly available data in the provided. The construction coverage report in October 9th indicates that the national 30-day mortgage delinquency rate reached 3.68%. This data is not broken down specifically by borrow residency status. The Reuters article in 23 mentions that FHA-backed loans for low-income and first-time buyers had a delinquency rate of 9%. Several ex-posts allege fraud, including claims that some non-permanent residents did not make mortgage payments, rented out properties, and then left. However, these are unverified assertions. So long and short of it is that they haven't been, in a public sense, tracking delinquency rates on payment back of these loans. But we know that almost 1 in 10 loans are given to immigrants without permanent residency, and that lower income and people without a track record have a much higher delinquency rate. So this this has a twofold bad impact on our country. One is it makes the laws of supply and demand mean that whenever something is higher in higher demand, prices go up. So uh, native born Americans are being priced out of the housing market, that housing would otherwise cost less because there'd be less competition for those housing units. But then secondly, whenever delinquency takes place, then somebody eats that cost, and it's the taxpayer because these are federally funded loans. So this is something that results in us being taxed more and unable to afford our housing. So it's a bad policy. It's been very strange. I've seen different anecdotal substantiations of immigrants being flown around the country and given housing, living in hotels, uh, where this has got to be costing millions of dollars a day, and just going, Who approved this? How does this work?" And not really getting a comprehensive answer. It just seems like, this is one of those things where our federal government is such a huge behemoth that's able to create very complicated system where it's hard to track much down. I saw one time an airport that had cordoned off part of itself so that immigrants would just have a place. It's like a holding place for immigrants for a time. It really does feel like just gobs of people from around the developing world have been imported into America and then shuffled into different communities where media is not there to document it. And it's just hard to know what to make of all this. So, if the tendency then is just there's certain nativist sentiments where get them all out of here, and then there's like this denialist thing where if you even notice you're racist, and I feel like I'm in the middle. I probably go more towards the nativist direction, but just what's going on here? Who is there? Has there been a comprehensive report or anything approximating that, telling us what's actually going on? Because it's just such a strange thing to me. Good morning, Evie. Good morning, Pat. Oh, I didn't know that. D says, happy to be functional and present at this hour today. Was able to attend church with my Anglican friends Sunday and receive the Eucharist. Went 3 months without. That's an important thing, isn't it? Yeah. Good morning, Greg. Good to see you, brother. So coming back to the news update. Oh, I'm going to close that down. We're going to continue to have drama around the border, around immigration. Ooh, there was a robbery at the Louvre. That's crazy. Yikes. Sea otters near Santa Cruz, California have started taking surfboards from the area's wave riders again. I saw this one like bit a lady and then got on her board when she hopped off. That's crazy. All right. That's it for that one. And then we're talking about China. Oh, yeah, they're going to talk about the Chinese underground church. Very good. Okay. Grace Jin Drexel hasn't heard from her father, Chinese underground church leader Ezra Jin, in over a week. The last thing he sent her was a text message 2 Fridays ago informing her that Wang Lin, one of the pastors in his church, had been detained by Chinese officials and asking her to pray for him. Quote, I kept Pastor Wang in my prayers as I went about my morning, waking up my kids, getting ready to go to work in DC. What she did not realize at the time was that Pastor Wong's arrest was the start of a crackdown on the Zion Church, a congregation of more than 1,500 that her father leads. Nor did she realize that the crackdown would come for Grace's father, as it soon did when he was arrested on spurious charges of, quote, illegally using information online, end quote. It's been more than a week and my dad is still in prison. We haven't been able to talk to him, writes Grace. Some 30 members of Zion Church have now been detained this month, a major escalation of the Chinese Communist Party's war on Christians' freedom to practice their religion. Today in the Free Press, we hear from the family on the front line for religious freedom. All right, so that's an article you can read at the Free Press. Mm. Young Republicans are radicalizing themselves online. Free Press does a good job riding right on that fence. Oh, here's Mom Donnie. Apparently, he's buddies with this guy who's an open jihadist. He's still probably going to get elected mayor, according to the people I read about. I'm not an expert. Ooh, what's Coleman Hughes doing? All right, let's skip to the bottom here. We had the No Kings protest. Okay, I don't think I missed anything. We can comment about the main topics today. We already got into one of them. Let me go ahead and pray with y'all. I know I'm kind of disorganized today. It's been kind of a crazy time. I'll tell you why here in a minute. Let's pray though. Self-knowledge. Page 69. The Lord be with you. Searcher of hearts, it is a good day to me when thou givest me a glimpse of myself. Sin is my greatest evil, but thou art my greatest good. I have cause to loathe myself and not to seek self-honor. For no one desires to commend his own dunghill. My country, family, church fare worse because of my sins. For sinners bring judgment in thinking sins are small, or that God is not angry with them. Let me not take other good men as my example and think I am good because I am like them. For all good men are not so good as thou desirest, are not always consistent, do not always follow holiness, do not feel eternal good in sore affliction. Show me how to know when a thing is evil, which I think is right and good. How to know when what is lawful comes from an evil principle. Such as desire for reputation or wealth by usury. Give me grace to recall my needs, my lack of knowing thy will in scripture, of wisdom to guide others, of daily repentance, want of which keeps thee at bay, of the spirit of prayer, having words without love, of zeal for thy glory, seeking my own ends, of joy in thee and thy will, of love to others. And let me not lay my pipe too short of the fountain, never touching the eternal spring, never drawing down water from above. Amen. All right, I'm going to minimize that. It keeps distracting me. We got Janice with us. Hey, Janice. And Nathan, good to see you, brother. Yeah, that's right. China, man. So there are going to be more. I wonder if there are already more Christians in China than in America. Oh, okay. This is a two-parter. World War II, China engaged, well, no, not engaged, suffered, especially in Nanking/Nanjing, terrible abuse in the Japanese territory of Manchukuo. They invaded and just were terrible to the population. They went through so much. But then when you read about what's going on now, you try and figure out how it is that some people groups get so messed up. Well, look at their history and see what trauma is there. This is just kind of the way of things. Duncan says we must have a secure border and enforce our laws, but we have to acknowledge that the de facto policy has been to create a path for legalization for those who have positively contributed. Yeah, it's I think we need to revisit the conversation about how we deal with immigrants. We need to do so calmly, well considered, and dealing with. I think one of the topics today is population decline. Yeah. Let me call these links up. All right. So the original post is from Latinx adjacent doctor PhD. American conservatives losing only 0.1 fertility since the 1990s is a very under-discussed phenomenon. We're all aware that we're in a population decline in the West, but when you look at conservatives versus progressives, the decline is much less dramatic for conservatives, and that's against the world average. Interesting. So some people would look at this and be encouraged, but look at Hazoni's quote here: conservatives have more children, but the left educates them. So that matters whenever you are farming out your kids 8 hours a day for years to people like this. This is Lucy Martinez. She was at the No Kings protest this weekend, And as somebody drove by, she several times over mimicked Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck. She's an elementary teacher from Chicago that mocked the death of Charlie Kirk. She works with kids. Lucy will now be the face of No King's protests. We couldn't have described the party of murder any better than Lucy did for us. They want us dead. So they found her. Oh, wow. They even put her email address on there. I would not have you send her. I don't think that's helpful. But what I think has been substantiated time and again is that more and more public school teachers are composed of far left women who really hate um, people like me, you know? And so the problem here is that people like me often want to focus on things other than raising children. And so we send them to the public school system kind of to educate them, kind of just for childcare. And that year over year, people like that indoctrinate our children into a certain set of values that are aligned against the Christian faith and against being a good, decent, moral human being. And I don't want anyone watching, if you're watching this for the first time, I'm not a Republican. I'm not one of these all Republicans are good and Republicanism aligns perfectly with Christianity. I don't do that. And I don't think many people actually do. I think most Republicans know there's a difference between Jesus and Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the church. They just see that the Democrat Party at this point in history is so thoroughly aligned against the church that if it comes between both parties, one is clearly less hostile to the faith of Jesus Christ. And also, one obviously produces life more than the other. And so there are some who say, look, conservatives are going to win out in the end. We're having more kids. But the reality is that whenever you're sending them to these institutions composed of people who don't reproduce, who are actually hostile to that, they'll say for environmental reasons usually, or just because they've made lifestyle choices that don't create children. What it really is a hatred of life and a hatred of the sacredness of life and God's image bearers flourishing. And so I think I don't know how many of you watched my interview with the gentleman from the Reformed Calvinist Church. Sen is his last name, Senn. Was it Eric? I forget his first name. But in order to be a member of his church, members have to sign a covenant saying that they will either homeschool or private school their children, but they will not put their children in the public education system, which I've never heard of a church doing that. But it becomes more and more abundantly clear why it is that churches would make that mandatory is you can't send your children to Caesar for education and then be surprised when they come home Romans, and families like mine have come to the conclusion that we're throwing our children to the dogs if we send them to the public school system. We educate and we privately homeschool our kids, and that means that I'm less productive professionally than I would be otherwise, and our family has less money than we would be otherwise if we had both parents working. And that's a decision that is already reaping rewards with dividends, and it's going to just get so much better as the kids get older, God willing, God willing. But at a certain point, you have to learn the lessons right in front of you. And if you refuse to, and you just keep saying, well, because I imagine it could work out this way, it's going to work out this way, that's just wrong. You can't do that. At a certain point, you got to sober up and see that it's just not working. So I'm aware that there are certain school systems that are not that bad, and if you have one of those, that's great. I certainly don't judge you, but the writing is on the wall. You need to be asking questions. You need to be making responsible decisions for your kids. If that means that you see less income, if that means that you don't climb the corporate ladder as fast as everybody else, it's worth it. For the sake of your kids' future, it's worth it. Um, I would also point you to my recent interview with Jamie Willis. I published that last week. That right there is a portrait of a father who very much regrets how he raised his children, just going along with the world. And it turns out that did harm to his kids. So remember, yes, your children are resilient, but they still take on permanent damage. And at a certain point, that becomes a choice on your part. There's certain unavoidable ways in which the world is going to damage your kids, but God help you if you're ambivalent to the damage they're being done. Just very brief reminder, the United States of America is not a democracy. Um, I'm sick and tired. This is from C Reason. I don't know who they are. I'm sick and tired of being called or considered a democracy. This just tells you how ignorant and truly uneducated the media and many politicians are. We are a constitutional republic. That's how our founders made this country. So you have quotes from 4 different founders. Thomas Jefferson, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people take away the rights of the other 49. John Adams said, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. And there are many wondering if we're doing that anyway. Benjamin Franklin said democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. And finally, Alexander Hamilton, we are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy. Just important. I know not everybody who spends time with me is American, but for those of you who are American, it is important to know these things so that when you encounter them, you speak truth. Something else that's not a democracy, the church, not made to be a democracy. Read about the rebellion of Korah and how that worked out whenever people insisted on democratic rule of God's community. Janice says private Christian schools in my area are constantly growing. Well, and that's for good reason. What you have to be aware of, though, is that drift that we're often talking about in Christian colleges also takes place in Christian private schools. And so you have to be vigilant. Anytime you are entrusting your child with anyone, you have to be vigilant about who they are. You need to ask paranoid questions, not paranoid, vigilant questions. And if they get defensive, get them out of there. You know, it's not justifiable to be defensive anymore. Coming back to this No Kings rally, check this out. This is footage of what do you call this? An effigy of President Trump, and they hand out a knife to people, and they're just stabbing President Trump. This is bad. We can't have this. That's I mean, not only is it bad if adults are doing this, but when you have children being groomed into violence this way. This is the nation that we're living in. You got public school teachers publicly simulating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then you have adults facilitating children simulating the murder, stabbing death of Donald Trump. We cannot have this as a culture. This is unacceptable. And this is the thing, like, in any community, you have to have self-policing. This no enemies to the right thing is so gross for right-leaning people. But on the left, it's been the case for a long time. Jordan Peterson was talking about this years ago. He says there's not a correction for those who go too far left. On the left, if you're on the left, then you see somebody further left than you and they're being nuts. There is no correction. You know, broadly speaking, live and let live, you be crazy, but the crazy voices are winning, and the left does not have the tools to keep them in check at all. And the people who elevate themselves as centrists are not sufficient to the task. The Overton window has shifted further and further left. This is just something everybody needs to look at and go, are y'all going to do anything about this? Jordan Peterson said, look, with right-leaning impulses, there's always a check on that. But with the left, there's not a check on that. And look at what happens whenever leftist forces take over. Look at the USSR, look at China. These are leftist authoritarian regimes. They always result in dehumanization, millions of casualties, eugenics. You know, this is what the modern world has seen. And if the modern left in America is not checked, it will go that direction. We need to understand that there's spiritual forces at play here, and that the institutions that are supposed to be a check on these things have been corrupted from the inside for a long time. I know that sounds paranoid, but I feel like it's been well substantiated, right? Let's pivot to more explicitly religious stuff. Interesting fact: the global Catholic population has grown by $15.8 million in the last year. Not dollars, people in the last year, reaching over 1.4 billion. worldwide, according to the latest Vatican statistics. That's incredible. I didn't realize they were still growing like that. Yeah, Marie reminds us Islam is the fastest growing religion right now. Catholicism will never keep up. The rest of us need to keep this in mind and quit making special concessions. As of October 2025, the Muslim population stands at approximately 2.05 billion out of they're a quarter of the world's 8.21 billion people. For the specific past year, the growth is estimated to be at 35 million. The rate is faster than the global population growth and outpaces other major religions. This has been accomplished by Muslims having large families and, in many cases, multiple wives. We are losing this race by being outbred. And if you're interested to know more about that topic and the spread of global Christianity, this week I'll be publishing my conversation with Reverend Dr. Timothy Tennant, where we talked very much about these trends. So if you're not subscribed to me, you might go ahead and get subscribed so you see when that is posted. Of course, I've had my issues with Roman Catholicism, but I also have things I really admire about them. One being they are the OG exorcists dealing with spiritual, demonic activity in the world, and I don't think that that can be ignored. So I don't know. As they grow, we all need to be worried about making sure that we are doing a good job spreading the gospel because any vacuum we leave is going to be filled by false religions. That's inevitable. So we need to rejoice that people are coming anywhere near Jesus, but then also we need to feel the heavy weight and burden of we need to protect the persecuted church, but then we also need to continue to prosper the church around the world. That is morally incumbent upon us. I've also, wanted to talk about things that not wanted. I think we have to talk about things that are inconvenient or not appropriate in polite society because when those borders are set up, it's to our detriment. One of them is that sex seems to correspond with some meaningful things in the current political and religious landscape. And when you're looking at Gen Z women, they're more progressive than ever. Their male counterparts are a bit more skeptical of all these changes. We're seeing a wedge being driven between young men and young women. This is going to, if you are ministering to young people, youth in the church, this is one of the things that you're going to have to appreciate. If you are going with the more leftist progressive direction, girls, young ladies are going to find you more appealing. If you're trying to reclaim primitive Christianity, young men are going to generally find that more appealing. So we've been talking about this with the Wesley Perkins, Will Perkins. He and I talked about that a good deal. He's doing college ministry and he's seeing some of these things among young people. Here's what Ryan Burge says. And remember, he is probably the best statistician on modern Christianity that we have. He says, I got the inspiration for this data exercise from reading Dan Cox's excellent Substack, American Storylines. It was specifically his post from March 20th, The Gender Gap in Church is Growing. Let's see what that looks like. I hadn't even seen this. Daniel Cox, he's a young fella. Young Christian women are much more liberal than men. Yeah, he says it more categorically than Burge does here. Dan took 4 questions that focused on social issues from the Pew Religious Landscape Study and demonstrated how young Christian men and young Christian women have differing views on abortion and LGBTQ plus topics. These are substantial topics. What he uncovered was that Christian women aged 18 to 24 are significantly more progressive on each issue compared to men of the same age. For instance, 54% of the female sample said that acceptance of transgender people is a positive change. It was only 29% of the male sample. That's not a small gap, it's a chasm, really. So he links to an article he wrote in 2023 asking the question, women are more religious than men, right? So that's an interesting topic to read about. We're not going to talk about it today. This entry is part of a much larger narrative emerging in the data that young men and young women are headed in completely different directions. Young men have stopped leaving church in droves and are probably just as religious as young women at this point. So there had been a separation, but now they're coming back. But the other side of that coin is that young men seem to be either moving to the right of the ideological spectrum or not budging from a more moderate position. At the same time, younger women are clearly trending toward the left, especially on social issues. So I wasn't going to talk about it today, but I feel like it's dishonest not to talk about it. This is Helen Andrews. She has been doing research on what happens whenever women enter sectors of the economy, professional field. What happens in what she has come to the conclusion of and is arguing is that when there is a certain preponderance of women in any system, it has a way of disrupting that system and reorienting it uh, to be hostile to men and to operate very differently than it did before, if it really operates at all. And so she tracks that out in the different fields where women have entered in mass. And this is something that I know does not fit with modern second wave feminist pieties or even really first wave feminist pieties, but we have to be able to engage in the conversation. Now, does that mean that Helen Andrews is 100% right about everything? No, she might be wrong about everything. But whenever there's a preponderance of data that suggests that men and women behave differently in a demographic sense, you're always going to find exceptions, and that doesn't interrupt the general truth. So, can we acknowledge general trends, or do we just ignore them and act like they aren't there? Because sometimes you can't acknowledge something because it's just not helpful. IQ differences between ethnicities. Charles Murray pointed it out. It's just not helpful. It's not a good way to govern society, you know. So, but then there are certain things that if we can fail to reckon with, we're just going to be talking past people. We're going to continue to try and make them fit in a box that they just don't fit in. And we're going to continue to see dysfunction and be frustrated and go, what's going on here? Well, we might have the explanations that just they don't fit the narratives given us for the world. And one of those narratives is that men and women are interchangeable. Maybe they're not. Maybe though we equally have God's image, we're equal image bearers. Maybe we're predisposed in different directions. And ancients had differing relations between men and women, not because they were sexist bigots, but because in in some senses it's good to have us not treated like we're all interchangeable. So that's what I'm bringing to this article. Um, this Pew data is really helpful with regards to trying to track down exactly why there's this huge gender divide happening among the youngest adults in the United States. So I took the 4 questions that Dan plucked out of the landscape survey and wanted to just break down those responses based on a bunch of factors: gender, ideology, age. My aim here is to try and unpack this causal puzzle as much as I can. It's always a good idea to start really broadly. So here is the share who answered affirmatively to each of these 4 questions in the entire sample, and then broken down by the political ideology of each. Support for abortion. Abortion should be legal. Gay and lesbian people should be allowed to marry. Acceptance of transgender people as a positive change. Homosexuality should be accepted by society. So the top line in all these is just all of them together, but you'll see conservative is red, moderate purple, liberal blue. So there was a minority. Wait. Oh, people who self-identify as conservative, moderate, or liberal. They're not. So of the conservatives, 34% of them said abortion should be legal. 15% acceptance of transgender people. Okay, and then of the liberals, of course, 90%, 73%. Okay, of course. And then moderates are somewhere in between, but also you'll see moderates, self-identified moderates are not exactly between conservative and liberal. They always skew, except here. That's kind of in the middle. Almost always skew liberal. So this would be the people who are generally liberal, but they just think the far left goes too far, so they just call themselves moderate. All right, I have the link to this in the show notes. You can read this on your own. Very interesting stuff. But the larger concern here is churches need to be places where people find mates to become spouses, where they then raise godly children and godly households that are a blessing to society around them. If you cater to leftists, what we've already seen is they don't have children, you know, and also they're female dominated, and this is generally speaking. And I think there's a lot more contention in those households. I think that's what feminism does. So that's why I've been less reticent than most Methodists to learn from what it is that Reformed Calvinist churches are doing. I don't share their doctrine, and I think they're too extreme sometimes. But when they're willing to revisit the feminist narrative and say, okay, well, we're going to go back to doing things in a certain way that privileges men here and women here and has different understanding. I'm interested in that, and I'm interested to hear women in those churches and how they perceive those things. I'm interested to see, is there more abuse in those households? Is there more satisfaction in those households? How are the children faring? These are things that we can actually look at, and it's not all anecdotal. Like, we can study these things, and I don't think that should be a threat. I think what is a threat is continuing to move forward as though nothing is wrong. And when we're wanting our churches to be places where, if you're a young woman or man seeking the Lord, you're going to find potential mates to build a life with. And if the church becomes a place where you either have, well, the fear would be churches become places that only have right-leaning males, and that young women associate with the Democratic Party and fall out of church and become even more hostile to men, which is what we're already generally finding. So, how do you reverse this? You would think that women would be more drawn to Christianity, but at this point in history, we're finding men more drawn to a certain kind of Christianity, and women finding it repulsive. It's just, it doesn't feel. How does this work out in the end? In any society where you have men, too many single men that are not married, bad things happen. So how do we get out ahead of this? I'm not sure what to do here. Because I want to build up young men in the church, but if there are not women that are drawn to strong Christian men, well, but man, that's what Will Perkins said, actually, is what he's finding at the Wesley is, as they build up these men to be strong Christian men, women are attracted to that. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe right now women are hostile because the men, generally speaking, are kind of these weak incels, these soy boys. What if we raise up masculine, godly men? Will the liberal feminist women still hate them, or is there something in their brains where they'll be like, oh, yep, this is good, I want this? That's a theory. I'm interested in that theory. I'm interested to see what you guys are doing with these topics. I think I'll be done going through the topics, and I'll just look at the comments that you guys have written, and then we'll end with a prayer. Good morning, Hosmer Emporium. That's an interesting picture. D says the general public is losing the ability to engage in civil public discourse. Even straight logic without biblical overtones is not very effective on reprobates anymore. I think that's true. How do you bring people to sanity? I feel like it's happening. I feel like everything that can be done is being done. And then it's just kind of a question of, is the spirit of destruction just, is God going to give us over to ourselves? I feel like I was talking with a liberal family member a couple of years ago, and we were talking about these trends, and she just said, sometimes the society's just got to crash. And I'm going, well, that's not inevitable here. Like, we could come back, but for so many people, the price of coming back is too high. I am not willing to go with those nasty Republicans, those deplorables. I don't care if they're right. If it's like these people who shake their fist at God, the God of the Bible, they say, if that's who God is, I'm not going to worship him. He's not deserving of my worship. It's just this hatred of what is true and good and beautiful. What do you do with that? They're just aligned against it. They're not going to hear anything different. Well, I think it's interesting. Thank you. Greg says these are tough and interesting questions. If you had to make a choice between attracting men and women to the gospel, which would provide more fruit long term? Well, and I don't think we have to answer that like and that's something that I'm regularly struggling against is what works, what is most effective. In the end, it's just what's faithful. And in the end, we have to call both men and women equal image bearers to godliness. But is it helpful to acknowledge that at this point in time, that seems to track, one's receptiveness to an orthodox word largely corresponds with one's sex? Is that a helpful thing to acknowledge? Yeah, that was the other thing. I pulled up this Facebook post today. I said I wasn't going to look at anything else, but the Northeast Global Methodists are promoting Mission Insight. And I don't know if you guys have ever checked that out, but it's just a statistical analysis of the area that you live in based on census data. And I think they have some other stuff that they put together, but based on them, you can look and track out what kind of people live around my church building, what specific cultural factors are at play around me. And I've always said, I don't really care about that. Like all these people are image bearers. They all have a notion of truth. They're all humans. So I need to relate to them on that level, and the Lord will draw them to us. There's this percentage of Native Americans that live around you, and this percentage of Hispanics, and this is the lower income population, and where they're all God's people. Just call them all. But is it helpful? I'm genuinely curious what y'all think. Is it helpful to know the demographic realities around you and how they track, generally speaking, in society right now? Is it helpful when you see a young man to go, oh, young men are coming back to the church right now? They're open to the Orthodox expression of Christianity. And oh, a young woman's coming in and she's awash in this feminist ideology that's really toxic. And, we need to make sure that we're wary of, is that helpful? I guess I'm inclined to say no. It's interesting, but is it helpful? Eileen says, I recommend a recent podcast by Mike Winger about engaging with a hostile world with a Christian heart. Sounds like that overlaps with the interview I did with Andrew Forrest, who is the pastor at Asbury Church in Tulsa. He put out a book called Love Goes First, where he said the Christian disposition towards a world that hates us is extending the hand of friendship first and entering into their world, even if they hate it, with love going first. So, yeah, if you're interested in that topic, you might consider the conversation I had with him, and you might consider his book. Yeah, that's an interesting theory. Jared says so. Moderates sort of realize mutilating children is bad. It's a step too far, but don't suspect they've been led far, far down a wrong path. They get there and need to take many steps backward. Yeah, yeah. Even so, we shouldn't take comfort from the moderates, I don't think. Michelle says if the churches lean toward the truth and if that draws more young men, young women will follow. Yeah, that's the theory. I like that theory. I think that would be good. I remember watching this documentary on the Proud Boys that were like, I don't even know what they're doing now. And yeah, they had some weird stuff going on, but I mean, it was mostly like taking guys that were in cells and being like, no, be a man. Be a man. And then they'd get together and they were bros, but then they also had women that were with them, and they interviewed these women, and I just remember being like, man, these are really chill women. They weren't all like what do they call them, these ladies that do like conservative homemaking stuff. They're mostly like just these young hip females that were like, I like that my boyfriend is not some soy boy wimp, and they would just sit around and let their men be men, and they would enjoy being women together, and it was just nice. So I don't know, I'd like to think. I saw this gal one time get on, she said, I'm into girls and boys, and I've dated a lot of different people, but this last weekend I went out on a date with a bro for the first time, and let me tell you, something in me activated. Like, he insisted on paying for everything. He took me around. He was taking care of me. I had to get up and go to the bathroom. At one point, he just laid his card down on the table. He said, "Get whatever you want." And my knees just buckled. It turns out I want a man to take care of me. Turns out I respond very well to this masculine taking care of me thing. And I've heard a number of women, that's the one that like really hit me hard. Just like, man, maybe there's just something built in here where if we stop messing with people, if we stop conditioning people through media and all these other means, a lot of this stuff will just the ship will right itself. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm about small government. I don't want the government messing with us through propaganda anymore. I like the resurrection of the Smith-Mundt Act that keeps the government from propagandizing us. And I like small business. I like government getting out of corporate welfare and letting the marketplace decentralize these corporations that are conditioning us to be these stinking lemmings, these miserable lemmings that are always buying stuff to make ourselves happy. I That's, if you want to know, I mean, all this stuff is connected for me. I think politics and religion are thoroughly overlapping, and that's why I lean into this stuff. I'm not anxious about it. Um, let's see. Duncan says most women don't want soy boys. Some do, and that's weird. Charles Murray's Coming Apart points out that the main problem is among non-college educated. The welfare state has replaced a man's familial duty. They don't marry and don't go to church. Yeah, I think Charles Murray, he's a voice to listen to. I'm not one of these, he's a terrible racist, but it's just we have to interpret the information responsibly, is all I'm saying. Nathan says, I just read the town reports for the town in which I live and the town where my church is at. Demographic data is useful, but it is not the gospel. That was Quattro saying that. Nathan says, it is helpful to know the demographics. It helps you know how to prepare the gospel message and where to direct your supplemental study. I'm going to go to local Hispanic household and go, well, I know you're Hispanic, so that means that you are more equipped to talk about Roman Catholicism. So let me come alongside you and use the lexicon that I know that you're more comfortable and familiar with. I just have a caricature in my head of the white guy who has all the data and now he feels like he can talk to people. And I'm not disagreeing with you guys. It just fits with a joke in my head. The final thing, I announced to my church yesterday that my wife and kids and I are going to have an adventure. We've decided that after more than a decade here in Nellwater, we're going to look for a new pastoral appointment. We don't know where we're going. I just wanted to urge you to be in prayer for us. It's kind of an uncertain place that we're in. We've said that we're happy to conclude the year with our church here in Nowata that's been happy to support this ministry in Plain Spoken and the various experiments that I've run, some of which have not been so successful. And we've learned and grown a lot here, but we're gonna move along. So that it's gonna be a time of transition, and we're looking to rehome some of our animals. If you know anyone in this area, these are my roosters. Look at these noble beasts. Look at that guy. Look at this guy. Beautiful creatures. They sing in the morning, noon, not at night. They're wonderful creatures. Anyone who wants them, come and get them and give me some money for them. But yeah, figured y'all would want to know how to pray for me. I've already got a couple churches that might be interested, but if you know if you have ideas about stuff that I should do, I've been thinking about planting a church in Tulsa, or maybe just going to. They've made it clear that there's not a place for me here in the heartland. There aren't open churches in the states that I'm in, but I moved around a lot as a kid. I think it's good for kids to learn about what's real and what's permanent, and then what's not. I remember going to college and so many students dropped out after the first year because they just never moved away from home. They didn't know how to adjust, and I think it's important for people to know how to do that. So, my wife and kids and I were looking around with those eyes of, oh, we're gonna have to say goodbye to this. We planted these trees that we're not gonna get to eat the fruit from, and we've poured our lives into. I sit in this space and I repainted these walls and I set up all this stuff in here, and it's quite a thing to build something up and then leave it, but I feel like that's a good and holy thing. So anyway, I appreciate you praying for me. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll be back at it again tomorrow, and we'll see what the Lord has for us then. Sorry again about the not going out on 3 platforms today. I appreciate y'all being gracious with me. Let's pray. Lord, it's a terribly confusing world that we're in. We thank you for giving us minds that we can use to try and comprehend it. We thank you for giving us bodies that we can navigate in it. And the fact that you have equally endowed both male and female bodies with your image, giving us dignity and some base level of holiness, a seeking after your will. I don't pretend to know the mechanics of it, Father. I know that Pelagianism is not the direction to go. I take no comfort in any of these things outside of your son Jesus. It's he alone who offers any true comfort, any true joy. I ask that you would help me to conform to the image of your son Jesus, as well as all the men and women who watch me and listen to me and consider my words. I ask that our churches would more and more be places where we adeptly navigate the different forces of life, and we conform all aspects of our lives, political, moral, financial. We put all of those things in submission to King Jesus, and we do acknowledge him as King. We ask that you would help us to bend the knee, to kiss the ring, to submit to the rod, that you would help us to flee from the wrath to come and truly be saved from our sins, that you would help us to be born again, and that you would wash us in the word. Lord, these things are wonderful mysteries that you've given us, and so often we make life much more mundane than it was intended to be. So, Father, wake us up, send us your convicting grace, help us to repent daily, help us to walk in holiness. We continue to petition you to hear our pleas for the people in Nigeria, our brothers and sisters there who are impoverished and at the mercy of hateful people. And we're concerned about the future in which these hateful people are reproducing more quickly than we are, in which they are spreading their perverse gospel more than the true gospel is being spread. Father, give us evangelical zeal and compassion for those around the world that does result in true transformation, not just for individuals, but for the whole world. Our vision is scriptural holiness across the globe. Equip us for the work at hand. The fields are ready, but the laborers are few, Father. Equip laborers to go out into the harvest. Help me and other people called to serve as elders and deacons, evangelists, apostles. Help us to know where and when to go. Give us holy zeal and boldness to proclaim your Son and him crucified, and give people ears to hear and eyes to see the truth of this world in preparation for the next. We ask these things in Jesus' most holy name. Amen. All right, friends, it's been fun. Thanks for spending time with me. I'll see you tomorrow.